Thanks, Olivia. Good morning, everyone. As Daniel mentioned earlier, my name's Caleb. I'm a doctoral student at Duke studying the Old Testament, and my family and I have been at Kindred for headed towards 3 years now. It is always a blessing and a privilege to speak with you all, so thank you so much for having me. My wife and my one-year-old daughter actually headed out to visit the in-laws this weekend, and before they went away, my daughter gifted me a pretty nasty little head cold, which is why my voice is a little bit lower than it normally is, and why I have some emergency tissues in my back pocket. I've also decided that I'm going to give myself one, hopefully very tactful, blow my nose break at some point. And I'm going to keep myself to one, and when I call this break, it's like a timeout, right? So you guys will kind of like respectfully like avert your eyes, and I'll quietly, and then we'll keep going. Does that sound fair? Okay, cool. I'd like to begin this morning in kind of a non-traditional way by just showing you all my sermon outline, because it's a weird outline, and I would like a moment to explain it. The next 20 minutes or so are going to unfold as follows. I'm going to get used to this mic as well. Sermon, TED Talk, rant, sermon. And let me explain. When I begin in earnest in just a minute, things are going to sound a lot like a sermon. We're going to talk about the scripture passage and think about what it means. But then things are going to sound more like a TED Talk for a little while. The TED Talk fans out there, these little short speeches, where like people present their one big idea that the world needs to know about, the power of vulnerability, the danger of a single story, that sort of thing. And my big idea is not really mine. I took it from a lot of other smarter people, but it has that kind of familiar TED Talky vibe to it. And then at a certain point, things are going to take a little bit of a turn. And you'll know it when you hear it, but you'll think to yourself, Caleb's getting a little worked up here. He's like, hasn't taken a breath in a while. What's going on? And at that point, you'll know that we have entered the rant portion of this morning's proceedings. And that belligerent tone will continue for a little bit, but I will get a hold of myself. I'll take a deep breath, and we're going to bring it back to Psalm 46, and we're going to end in a more properly sermonic place. So why am I telling you all this? Well, the Apostle Paul says in 1 Corinthians 7:25, he says, regarding this matter, I have no command of the Lord, but I give my opinion as one who by the Lord's mercy is trustworthy. I really like this verse. I think it's kind of funny. Basically, Paul is saying like, on the big stuff, the resurrection of Jesus, the nature of salvation, that's like straight from the big G-O-D, from God upstairs, right? But these smaller matters that you're asking me about right now, I don't really know. God hasn't told me anything specific about that, but I do have some strong opinions, so I'm going to share them, and you can take them for what that's worth. And so the reason why I share that verse with you is because this is exactly how I want you all to think about the TED Talk and especially the rant portion of what's coming. Nothing that I say up here is ever straight from God's mouth. I don't have the kind of access that Paul did. But this week in particular, I am straying just a little bit further than I normally do into personal opinion. I've got a bit of an axe to grind this morning, and I just want to be upfront about that. I think it's all relevant, personally, to the psalm that we're talking about and to our own lives as Christians, but and I'm going to show you my best to show you how, but take it with a grain of salt, and you can decide for yourself if I am one who by the Lord's mercy is trustworthy. All right, back to regularly scheduled programming. Our scripture reading this morning is one of my favorite psalms in the whole Bible, Psalm 46. And one of the things that I love about this psalm is its structure. It's structured like this. 3 times it starts in a fairly calm place. And then it's as if the chaos of the world sort of starts to break in. The earth is changing, the waters are roaring, and the swords are clashing. And right as the commotion reaches a fever pitch, the tension breaks, and the poem falls back to a more peaceful place. I'm going to read through the psalm to kind of show you what I mean. And if you want to pull it up on your phone or something, I'm reading from the NRSV translation that Olivia did a great job reading just a moment ago. But listen to the rises and the falls. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore, we shall not fear, though the earth should change, though the mountains shake in the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, though the mountains tremble with its tumult. Selah. No one really knows what Selah means, but one theory is that it's some sort of musical notation, maybe like a rest even, or a deep breath mark, which works really well for this psalm. And we're back to a calmer place now. There's a river whose streams make glad the city of God. God is in the midst of the city, and it shall not be moved. God will help it when the morning dawns. The nations are in uproar. The kingdoms totter. He utters his voice, and the earth melts. The Lord of hosts is with us, and the God of Jacob is our refuge. Selah. And there's one more time. Come, behold the works of the Lord. See what desolations he's brought on the earth. He makes war cease to the ends of the earth. He breaks the bow. He shatters the spears, and he burns the shields with fire. Be still and know that I am God. I am exalted among the nations. I am exalted among the earth. The Lord of hosts is with us, and the God of Jacob is our refuge. Selah. And I love that. I love the buildup of the action and the chaos and the stress followed by a release, a measured retreat into the refuge of God, the Lord of hosts. I'm particularly struck by the beginning of verse 10, the first line in the last downslope, the third and final return to peace and confidence. And these lines, God seems to kind of take over the psalmist's voice and speak to us directly. And he says, "Be still and know that I am God. I'm exalted among the nations. I'm exalted among the earth." And what I want you to notice about this for right now is that these are instructions. These are commands, right? It didn't have to be this way. God could have broken in and just declared things. Everything's fine, don't worry. But he didn't. He gave instructions to the readers. And he asked them to do two simple, but I think ultimately very profound things: to be still and to know that God is God. This is the third and I think final week in our sermon series about hurry. Yes, I got the confirmation. During which we've tried to get a handle on the kind of harried, frantic pace at which we often live our lives, and to try to find some way of dialing it back, of achieving some level of peace and contentment in the midst of all this chaos. And my take on the topic, and the one that I think is being addressed by Psalm 46, particularly by those two instructions at the end, has to do with our attention. Our attention. I think by asking us to be still and to know that God is God, Psalm 46 is making a claim on our attention. And I mean attention in a very literal, even sort of scientific sense. Our consciousness has two layers to it. There's like our general consciousness, everything that we see, hear, feel, touch, etc. But then within our general consciousness, there's this second layer that we tend to call our attention. And our attention is like a spotlight over which we have at least some measure of control, and which allows us to select a further subset of that general consciousness. And this is super important for our basic survival, right? Imagine I'm a hunter-gatherer from 3,000 years ago. When I notice that a lion is running towards my village, I turn my attention, my spotlight, away from the berries that I was picking and towards the really large, hungry mammal. The berries are still in my field of vision, right? But they might as well not be. I don't register them at all anymore because I'm totally dialed in on the unfolding crisis. Bringing to modern day, this is why sometimes when I'm lost in a really good book, my wife Becca has to call my name 3, 4, 5 times just to get me to respond. My attention is so focused elsewhere that I literally don't hear her. I have no mental record, no memory of her saying my name, despite her insistence that she has yelled it at increasing volume from only 10 feet away. This for real drives her nuts. We have fights about it, but that's neither here nor there. I give you this tiny little cognitive science lesson because it leads into my big idea, my TED Talk idea, so to speak, that, remember, is not really mine. Happy to point you to my sources if you want to chat afterwards, but this is it. Our lives are ultimately the sum of the things that received our attention. I'm going to say that one more time. Our lives are the sum of the things that received our attention. I've got a cute little baby story to help illustrate what I mean. My daughter is 14 months old, which means that she started eating real human food a few months ago. And when you feed a baby real food, you're supposed to do it at least 3 times a day, the doctor told me. And you chop up whatever you've got into the fridge in little tiny pieces because you've developed a deep, deep fear of choking hazards. And then you just kind of stare at the kid for like 15, 20, 25 minutes, however long it takes her to eat enough food to satiate your other massive fear, which is that she's slowly starving to death. And I cannot express to you how incredibly boring I find this process. You're not supposed to leave. Again, the choking issue. But I finished my food in like 6 minutes. So there's all this time where I'm just sitting there. And often, what I end up doing is I pull out my phone, and my attention, my spotlight, moves off my daughter and onto whatever I happen to pull up on that little screen. And so what do I remember from that 20 minutes? What gets incorporated into my memories, into the set of experiences that slowly, day by day, week by week, year by year, accumulates into my life? It's not the funny, shocked face Micah Rose made when she bit into a particularly sour blueberry. It's not the way that she has already discovered the dog will eat anything that she flows on the floor. I miss those things. Instead, what gets logged away is 1/3 of a New York Times article about all the crazy stuff Trump is doing right now, a few Instagram posts from someone that I sat next to in calculus class 20 years ago that I haven't spoken to in who knows how long, and 13 minutes of YouTube shorts, most of them featuring people cooking Wagyu steak in increasingly unrealistic and strange ways. And the last thing I want to do is shame tired parents, right? I'm a tired parent. I fully acknowledge that sometimes you got to do what you got to do to get through the day. I also don't want to let non-parents off the hook because there's a whole bunch of different examples of this phenomenon that I think are worth mulling over. For instance, sometimes I'm really trying to stop doing this. I'll start watching a movie, but the plot starts to slow down about 25 minutes in, and I find myself pulling out my phone. And 2 hours later, the movie ends, but I have only the faintest outline of the plot in my head. The rest of it has been pushed out by the scores of a few hockey games featuring teams that I don't follow, a really stressful Twitter feed about some sort of crisis in Lebanon, and 37 minutes of YouTube shorts, most of them featuring elaborate, time-lapsed home improvement projects that I will never have the expertise or the means to carry out myself. And if I continue too long in this pattern, allowing my attention to just be fractured all over the place or directed towards things that I don't really care about, entire afternoons will fly by. A whole weekend is gone all of a sudden, and I'll find that my mental space, what I'm thinking about, what I'm remembering, it has very little to do with my actual life, like the people in front of me, the physical places that I go. Most of it has disappeared into this kind of vaguely anxious void where I'm fixated on things that either don't really matter or I have no control over. I have this sort of vague sense that the earth is changing, the mountains are shaking, and the waters are roaring and foaming, but I don't know what to do about it, and it's blocked out almost everything else. And I really think that at least one of the ways that we can interpret these lines of Psalm 46 is to understand them as a claim by God on our attention. If our life is the sum of all of the things that have received our attention, then at least part of what God is asking for in Psalm 46 is to be a part of our lives. He's asking us to, as best we can, gather up our attention and to at least momentarily redirect it away from all the chaos and stress of the world, away from the silly media junk food constantly pinging away in our pocket, and to direct that attention towards Him. Think about those last two commands in the psalm. Be still. Just let the noise stop for a moment. For a second, turn off the news podcast, get off YouTube, silence those notifications, try to gather up that attention from all the different places that's kind of been left lying around. Know that I am God. Know that God is God. Try to redirect that attention towards me, towards God. Literally, as best you can, take that mental spotlight that you've got and direct it towards God. And this is a really difficult thing to do because I don't know if you've noticed, but people are after your attention. Everybody wants it. In fact, right now, there are legions of extremely intelligent, extremely wealthy, extremely powerful people and corporations sitting around just scheming up ways of capturing and holding your attention. Did you know that companies like Instagram and TikTok literally employ cognitive psychologists, brain scientists, in order to figure out the perfect number and distribution of notifications that will get your eyeballs back on their apps as quickly as possible for as long as possible? I don't know if you knew this, but the same psychological tricks used to create slot machines in Vegas have been used to create social media apps for teenagers. Did you know that reporting has come out that not only shows these sorts of attention-capturing tricks used by all kinds of internet companies, news organizations, political groups, not only are they severely detrimental to our mental health, but some of the people that use them, Meta, Facebook in particular, they knew the damage that they caused, they buried that information, and they just continued on in the same manner. That was the rant, in case you didn't realize. I'm through it. I'm fine. Sorry for getting worked up. In all seriousness, though, we live in what a lot of people are calling an attention economy and an attention political sphere. Your attention, what you decide to direct your spotlight on, it makes all kinds of billion-dollar companies succeed or fail, and all sorts of political groups and candidates succeed or fail. They're desperate to capture your attention, and they are much more concerned with their bottom lines or their political futures than with your well-being. And into this situation, I really think that Psalm 46 recommends a more excellent way, a better option. Be still. Gather up your attention from the places that have taken it, and know that I am God. Begin trying to redirect that attention onto God and the things of God. If I can be honest with y'all for a second, I have an insecurity about my preaching, and that it is insufficiently practical. I like weird Bible passages, confusing theological points, and I got to be careful not to get lost in the clouds sometimes. But we are about to get super practical. I have literally got a short list of things that you can start doing today to be still and to know that God is God. Super practical recommendations. Most of them come from my own many attempts with some successes, but many more failures to obey these instructions myself. And I want to be clear what I mean. Thinking about what it means to be still, by that I mean, how do we gather up our attention from the places that it's been left or that it's been captured? And then know that God is God. How can we start to redirect some of that attention towards God and the things of God? I'm going to start with be still. 3 ways that we can practice being still. Number 1, turn off all non-essential notifications on your phone. Smartphone notifications are, and I don't want to be dramatic here, one of the most devious plots Satan has ever unleashed on this world. I cannot tell you how many times I'm just starting to I'm just getting into a good book. A conversation has just started to get more meaningful and more serious. The baby has just settled into a cute little snooze in my lap, and bring, and my mind immediately can't help but refocus onto whatever lies behind that sound. Half the time, it's not even a real notification. It's one of those like you get a notification from Instagram, and it doesn't even say so-and-so has commented on your picture. It just says something like, been a while since you've checked Instagram. I wonder what you're missing out on. It drives me crazy. But if you turn off all non-essential notifications and be really ruthless about what you consider essential. I recently stripped my notifications down to phone calls and texts from my wife. That's it, and it's been really freeing for me. Second thing that we can do, carve out at least an hour before you go to bed and when you wake up in the morning, during which you do not look at any screen of any kind. I'm fairly good at this now these days, but for a long time, the smartphone was the very last thing that I saw before I closed my eyes at night, and the very first thing I saw when I woke up. And this just wreaked havoc on my ability to sleep, and it meant that I finished and began every day with this kind of low-level, simmering anxiety. But I got an old-fashioned alarm clock. I moved my charger into the kitchen, and it has made a massive difference for me. Third recommendation, and this is how practical we're getting, you could get the Freedom application. This is their logo. I am not sponsored by these guys in any way. I will get no cut, but I think it is awesome. What it does is it lets you block out specific portions of the internet or specific apps on your various devices for schedules that you set, and it's very customizable. What's nice about it is that it takes some of the pressure off of your willpower. One of the issues with internet addiction is that it's an addiction, and so the ability to actually remove the temptation entirely for certain periods of time is a real game changer for me. I recently decided to block Twitter, or X, I guess, around the clock on all my devices. I have no ability to get on Twitter, no matter how bad I might want to, which is good for me personally. I also lock myself out of pretty much everything for those few hours before bed and when I wake up, and I can't recommend doing that enough. Let's move on to the second instruction from Psalm 46. Know that God is God. So following those previous suggestions, or whatever strategies work for you, you've rebuilt, to a certain extent, your ability to pay attention, to gather your attention from all of the places that it's been scattered, and you've even carved out some fairly significant blocks of time in which your attention is not constantly under attack from the internet and smartphones. How can we start directing that attention towards God and the things of God? Well, remember how you've ditched all your screens for an hour before bed and an hour after you wake up. We're going to start putting those little blocks of time to good use. And one of those blocks of time, I'd recommend reading a single psalm and thinking about what it means for 5 minutes. Now, you cannot look up the psalm on your phone, right? Your phone has got to be, it's in a different room somewhere else, ideally somewhere you can't even see it. Dig out that physical Bible, print off the psalm, whatever, read one psalm, and think about what it means for 5 minutes. That's it. In my experience, it's very important to start super small. I've gotten all worked up about this stuff before and decided each morning I'm going to wake up before everyone else and I'm going to read the book of Job in the original Hebrew for an hour before the sun rises. And it never works. You got to start small. So instead, either right before you go to bed or right after you wake up, no screens in sight, read one psalm and think about what it means for 5 minutes. And after you've done this for a while, for like a month, long enough where it feels more like a habit than a struggle, you could try adding one additional step. Read one psalm, think about what it means for 5 minutes, and then pray for 5 minutes. You know, we can cut that down. Let's make it 2.5 minutes of prayer. Prayer is really hard. For me, it is, at least. You can use a written prayer if you like. I particularly recommend the prayer collection called Every Moment Holy. They're really, really good. But now we're at read one psalm, think about what it means for 5 minutes, and pray for 2.5 minutes. And if we can take these small steps, they're hard steps, but they're achievable. If we take these small steps, our capacity, our ability to pay attention to God, to be still and to know that God is God, it will slowly get stronger and stronger. And the constant pull of the phone and the smartwatch and the smart TV, it will begin to abate just a bit. And you'll be amazed, I think, at how real God becomes. I go through periods of being really good about this stuff and periods of not doing well at it at all. And I can tell you that the difference in my spiritual life and my experience of God is massive. And I think it's because this process, these two instructions, striving to be still, striving to know that God is God, I think that it might be like a prerequisite, a necessary first step to really perceiving the presence of God in our contemporary culture, to experiencing God as someone who is alive and active in our world, who can calm the seas in our lives and in our minds. Because sometimes, fairly often, I think to myself, if I'm being honest, I don't really see God at work in my life or in the world. Where is God exactly? The chaos of my family life, America's insane politics, the crazy stuff going down in the world. Now that feels real. I cannot stop thinking about that stuff. And I wonder if God's response would be something like, Caleb, you watch upwards of 10 hours of YouTube every week, 4 to 5 hours of sports, and who knows how long just skimming news headlines. Meanwhile, you spend 20 minutes once a week attempting to pay attention to Daniel's sermon on Sunday. How exactly am I supposed to cut through all that noise? If I were an active and present, if I was active and present in your life, how would you even know it? You've got to pay attention. Your life is the sum of everything you've paid attention to. In this scenario, God has listened to my TED Talk. Just go with that for a second. If you want me to be a part of life, you've got to turn that spotlight of yours upwards every once in a while. It's not easy to do this, friends. It's really hard. So much is dead set against us in this regard. The richest, most powerful companies and political figures in the world spend untold millions and billions of dollars every year trying to capture more and more of our attention, trying to hijack our brains and the brains of our kids, tapping into basic neuropsychology just to increase their quarterly profit margins. I started ranting again. A deep breath. It's not easy. It is not easy to be still and to know that God is God. But I think that we've got to try. Because on the other side of this, I think, is really some measure of true peace. With the earth changing and mountains tottering and waters roaring, Psalm 46 asks us to turn our attention toward the Lord of hosts, who is our refuge. Would you please pray with me? Dear Lord God, you are the God of the roaring seas, the shaking mountains, and the earth that is just constantly shifting and changing all around us. And in the midst of all of this, you promise to be a place of refuge and peace. I ask that you would remind us of that truth and help us meditate upon it to direct our attention towards you. It's not an easy task, but with your help, you can and will lead us towards real peace. Amen.